Hello everyone, my name is Pixlriffs and welcome back to the Minecraft Survival Guide. I hope you guys are having a good day. I'm very excited about today's episode because all of the work I did at the mob farm over there, you can't actually see it, it's in the distance over there somewhere in unloaded chunks right now. All of the work I did at the mob farm now means I have a lot of TNT, and we can finally start work on one of the projects that I'm very interested in about the Nether update, and hopefully settle a bit of a debate that's been happening in the comments lately. Because when I set up that mob farm and said, hey, the goal of this is to get tons of gunpowder so I can make TNT and go TNT mining for ancient debris in the Nether, people came to the comments and said, but Pix, just use beds. You've got a wool farm, you've got a wood farm, beds are super cheap. Why not use beds? And my response to that is that I really don't like the bed method all that much. I've tried it a couple of times now on streams and just in casual gameplay, and to be honest, I don't really like it all that much. I think it's a little bit slow, I think it's a little bit messy. I feel like TNT is going to be better. I would probably rather go mining manually than use beds to explode some stuff. And I said as much in the comments in a few replies to people, but I thought today we could do some empirical testing. We could actually put each of these methods to the test and find out what is the best way of getting hold of ancient debris. I'm going to call it from downtown. I have a feeling it's going to be TNT for a few reasons, which I'll go into a little bit later. But we also have the method of pickaxes. I've got 2 netherite pickaxes, each of which has over 2,000 durability plus efficiency 5, unbreaking 3, and mending. This is basically a surefire way of guaranteeing that you can tunnel through the nether for as long as you want and hopefully find some ancient debris while doing it. There are even now coordinates that have been shared around on the Minecraft wiki and in other places where people think that mining at Y level 15 is usually the best place to find debris, mainly because you end up avoiding lava lakes spilling in on your head that way for most of the time, although there are some pretty hefty lava pockets down there that I have found, and it's also probably the midpoint between the 2 coordinates at which ancient debris can generate. Y8 and Y22 is typically the range in which you want to look for debris, and then the bottom of that like 22 level is more or less where the bottom of the lava lakes are. So we're going to try out the TNT method versus the pickaxe method versus the bed method, and I've got myself a bunch of supplies here. There are 63 in each of these stacks instead of 64 because it's a number divisible by 3, and that's the amount of wood and wool you need to make a single bed is 3 wood, 3 wool. I'm also going to bring some crafting tables with me because I'm going to need them, right? We need to craft beds as we go. Beds are not stackable either, which is another one of the things that means I have to bring them in this form, and another one of the reasons I think the bed method not all that great, considering that we have so many stacks of TNT in this chest, which I'm excited to unleash. Now, there are a couple of other methods that we might be trying, and one of them is a little bit dangerous. That one I'm probably not going to do in survival, or at least not in this world, because it has the potential to be A, a little bit dangerous, and B, potentially damaging to the ancient debris itself, and that is to summon the Wither, because of course the Wither is an explosive creature, and it will deal a lot of explosion damage to the surrounding blocks. It will blow up large areas of the Nether for you. It will also probably bring lava down on your head. It will go after other mobs in the environment. It's going to be an entire mess. And the blue skulls it fires can break ancient debris blocks, and then when they drop on the ground, the other explosions it causes can destroy it. And I'm going to attempt to prove that in a segment of this video a little bit later on when we are done with some of this. But the other method we could potentially try is end crystals, because end crystals are another explosive source. You pop them down on a block of obsidian or a block of bedrock. In this case, we're going to be using obsidian because it is a little bit more portable than bedrock is, and you fire an arrow at it from a distance and it blows up the surrounding environment with a big old bada boom. So I think we're going to take each of these methods into the Nether except for the Wither. We're going to use 4 different methods: pickaxes, TNT, end crystals, and beds, and we're going to measure which one of those gets us the most ancient debris over the course of 1 hour. And of course, so that we can be guaranteed to find a nice untouched area of ancient debris, I'm going to fly south in the Nether basically until I hit some worthwhile terrain. I'm thinking maybe beyond this warped forest is where I'll go, just in case we end up digging in the wrong direction. This seems like a sensible enough place to start. Let's see if we can dig down here and see if we don't get a bit of lava lake underneath here, because we are surrounded by one right now. And I'll make sure we signpost this so that I know how to get back here in the event that I need to go and repair my pickaxes in the course of an hour. But I think an hour is probably a reasonable amount of time to go mining with 2 netherite pickaxes. We will mend them fully before we try the mining method, just to make sure that we can be fair and unbiased here. And we've now mined our way down to Y15. So I'm going to dig this way a little bit, and I'm going to set up a nice long stretch of tunnel and segment this into 4 sets of chunks. One for the mining method, one for the bed method, one for the TNT method, and one for the end crystal method. And I don't know how long we're really going to do the end crystal one for, because I have a feeling we're going to run into some flaws of that particular plan pretty quickly. But I'm going to mark out each of these with a basalt pillar to make sure that we are in the right area each time and that we don't stray from one side to the other. The reasoning behind this being that we should, hopefully, in theory, have one ancient debris vein per chunk down here in the nether, so we should potentially see a decent amount of it appearing in each of these chunks. And we're going to dig long tunnels in this direction, which is still heading south, so that's still into new nether terrain. Hopefully we shouldn't hit anything that's already been generated, and we should be able to find a decent amount of ancient debris down here. But I wouldn't be me if I didn't want to spend a little bit of time making this look pretty, so I'm going to do a little bit of decoration here, and I'll see you guys on the other side. Hey folks, welcome back. So here we are about to start the test, and I have each of these areas laid out to explain the methods we're going to be using here. Let's start with the one right here in front of us, the one that I actually set up right in front of the entrance. This is going to be the straight up tunneling method using pickaxes, and I have like a little bit of durability taken off this pickaxe, but it's really not going to make that much of a difference, and if I wanted to, I could always grab some of the quartz in the walls to get some experience from that with a fortune pick and hold my silk touch in my opposite hand to get a little bit more experience, so I can mend those before we kick off here. But the idea is that we are going to be digging 2x2 tunnels at Y15 and trying to expose a decent amount of blocks in the surrounding area. We can leave a 1 or 2 block gap because we'll be able to see each of these blocks from both sides, so we could even leave another gap and end up going 2 blocks over from each tunnel and then digging another tunnel, thereby exposing as many of the blocks in this area as possible while still being somewhat efficient with my tools. I think we could even end up digging tunnels at a diagonal from these, as I've been doing in my other branch mining projects for this stuff, and end up doing a diagonal so that we end up getting more blocks that we might have seen in the floor or the walls of the other tunnels. And this is just going to be a case of the raw power of the pickaxe. I've got efficiency 5 and unbreaking on these pickaxes, so they're going to last a long time, and they will insta-mine netherrack. Of course, netherite is going to be the most durable tool to use for this job, but of course you could swap out for whatever pickaxes you have to hand if you needed to, and the idea is that we're going to be putting all of the ancient debris, and only the ancient debris that we uncover, in this shulker box here. In the shulker box, I also have some potions of fire resistance that I traded from the piglins, because in my testing of this, in my streams when I've been mining for ancient debris, I have noticed that you encounter a lot of lava pockets, and sometimes the only way out of that is through. And when you can't quite reach the blocks that are going to block off the lava flow from getting into your tunnel, the best thing you can do is just chug a fire resistance potion, YOLO it, head in there and place as many netherrack blocks as you can before you end up running out of time. And I think that approach is going to work pretty well for the mining method, and the mining method only, because the explosions generated by the other methods are going to take care of the lava in a slightly different way. With that in mind, let's move on to the TNT method. This is just for display around here. I might end up taking some of these down if I end up needing them. I'm not entirely certain how long this entire shulker box of TNT is going to take for us to go through, but hopefully it's less than an hour. The TNT method is, to my mind, the most efficient way, simply because of the chain reaction effect. Basically, one TNT, when it explodes, will light the next TNT, and it will continue on down the chain. I have found that the most reliable way of getting this to happen is by placing them 2 blocks apart. So that does mean we are spamming the TNT a little bit as we head down the corridor. But the other great thing about these is that they can be detonated remotely, or if you light them up close with a flint and steel, you have some time to get away. And you know what? I feel a little bit worried about that. I'm probably just going to remove some of the TNT blocks from around here in case they end up blowing up the shulker box that I have here that contains all of the rest of my TNT, and I really don't feel like farming all of that again. So let me demonstrate for you briefly how this method works. You light one TNT, and the entire thing sets off a chain reaction that continues on down the tunnel. Now, as you can see, we've cleared out a large area, and look at that. What luck, an ancient debris just there in the ceiling for us, ready to collect. And this will unleash a lot of lava, but thankfully, due to the kind of random way in which TNT destroys the scenery here, you will find that these lava flows are actually just going to flow down into pockets in the scenery, and they won't cause too much trouble for you. In this case, we can just... Oh, there's even more ancient debris down there in the wall that I didn't spot a second ago. Right, we'll have to collect that in a second. But there we go. All you need to do is just come up here, plug that lava source with some netherrack, or alternatively, if you have a bunch of buckets on you, you can just put the lava source in a bucket, and that deals with the problem. So a little bit of pillaring is required. We need to block off occasional lava flows here and there, but that's usually just one pocket in the wall of the nether. It's nice and easy to deal with. And then we can come back down here, see if this reveals any more ancient debris, and harvest the juicy veins that we've already found in these walls. Occasionally, it might be necessary to dig around the rest of the wall there, just in case that uncovers an additional piece of ancient debris that's generated on a diagonal or gone vertically or something like that, but our TNT experiment has already got off to a good start by netting us 3 ancient debris. I'm not going to count that towards our 1 hour total, but I am going to pop it in the chests around here nonetheless, and we'll be able to pick those up a little bit later. So I've stashed that away in this barrel here. It's in the mining exhibit, but only the ones in the shulker box are going to count towards our 1 hour total, and that's how we're going to stay objective about this entire thing. So we're simply going to dig basically 1 block wide tunnels down here until we reach a point where we need to place a bunch of TNT, set the fuse, and the entire thing is going to blow down the line, and we'll be able to just go through that resulting tunnel, harvest any ancient debris we find there, move on to another part of the chunk, or alternatively keep going down the same tunnel. We'll see how far we get. On the opposite side of the mining area, we have the infamous bed method. You guys know this well at this point. I think it's going to work out for us in any way because we will get some ancient debris, but I think we're probably going to go through a lot of these without really getting a huge amount back. The bed method does of course rely on the fact that beds explode in the nether and can be right-clicked on to generate a pretty large explosion. We can generate the explosion from a distance, so I think I might end up placing a couple of blocks over here just to shield myself from the blast a little bit, and boom, there we go. So that is going to generate quite a large crater, also quite a lot of fire, and you will notice that this does not create a chain reaction with other beds in the same way that TNT does, and that is why I'm not really in favor of the bed method. It's not particularly safe. Even if you hide behind a couple of blocks, you're likely to take a little bit of damage and need to eat more often because you are recouping health. You end up with a giant mess that you need to clean up, and from my experiments with this bed method already, I honestly haven't found all that much ancient debris by using it. It does, of course, mean you are using cheaper materials than the materials required to harvest TNT, and that might work out in your favor, especially if you are in the early game, but the method is slow, a little bit laborious, and requires you to put out all of this fire, which can occasionally deal a little bit of extra damage to you as well if you're not being too careful. And I do recommend putting out all of the fires because they may occasionally be hiding or be burning on top of blocks of ancient debris. And since I have fire tick turned off in this world because I prefer to build with fire and not have to worry about it burning down some of my houses, sometimes that can actually hide ancient debris because the fire on top of the ancient debris will never go out. And that is something I need to be a little bit aware of while I'm clearing this whole area up. So the bed method is going to be employed in much the same way you just saw and in the same way as the TNT method. We're going to dig a poke hole in here, we're going to step a little bit to the side, detonate a bed in that hole and clear up whatever is left in the area. And hopefully that will net us some ancient debris in the long run. Last, and I'm going to be honest, probably least, is the end crystal method. This is one of the most volatile methods to use, and it has its own peculiar set of quirks. For example, you have to place the end crystals on obsidian to begin with, or bedrock. We could dig down to bedrock level and bomb out the remainder of what's still netherrack down there at bedrock level, but that seems a little bit awkward to me, and we're not necessarily guaranteed to find a huge amount of ancient debris down there below those levels. Y8 is probably the lowest coordinate we're going to find any debris, so between Y8 and Y4, where the bedrock starts generating, we might not get all that much. The other thing about end crystals is that, like the beds, they cannot have any kind of chain reaction between them. If you put an end crystal next to an end crystal, one will not blow up the other, or it will blow up, but it won't cause another detonation. It will simply destroy the entity, like that. See, that end crystal was actually in range of the explosion from the end crystal that I just detonated down that corridor. So end crystals are really just here as a bit of a flex. They are not a particularly effective explosive for dealing with areas areas like this and uncovering ancient debris. And as you can see, this has created an explosion of a similar radius to the beds, meaning that the beds are much, much cheaper to deal with, and while the end crystals don't cause as much fire, there really isn't much of an advantage to them over beds. Having said that though, after digging out a little bit of the gravel, I will admit that I did spot this earlier, there is one piece of ancient debris here, but I did mine to this one instead of actually uncovering it using the end crystal, so I'm not entirely certain it counts in the end crystal's favor. I'm going to put this piece of ancient debris in the barrel that I mentioned earlier, so we're not counting it towards our numbers, and now I'm actually going to start each method in turn. We're going to be spending an hour doing each one. Obviously, all that footage is not going to be included in the video, but I will do my best to give you guys a bit of a tally up of what we got from each method when I'm done. So I'm going to set a timer. We're going to start with the mining method, and let's see how we get on. So, the moment of truth is here. We're about to reveal exactly how much ancient debris I got from each method. And before we do this, I should probably add the caveat that this is still a little bit random. Obviously, it is immensely lucky to come upon any ancient debris by any method, and I guess blowing out areas with TNT or beds is going to be more guaranteed simply because you're exposing more of the terrain inside a chunk. You're blowing up more of the blocks here, and that's going to potentially show you some blocks that generated below the levels that we were mining at. But it seems like overall, mining with 11 ancient debris gathered is actually the worst method here. Actually, no, that's entirely a lie. The worst method here was the end crystal one, because I placed the end crystals on obsidian blocks. If you don't take the obsidian block away, you blow up the end crystal and lava pours in from the ceiling. And at that point, I was just done messing with lava at all, so I just never continued this method. Ancient debris gathered from this, 0. Well, maybe 1 if you count the one that I found in the other room when I blew up that end crystal. But I mined to that one, so it doesn't matter. It doesn't count. But anyway, yeah, end crystals, just don't do it. Use beds if you want to have that kind of method. It is a little bit better. And speaking of beds, here is what we got. Having blown up 60 beds, basically like 20 of each color, because you need 3 for each stack here, and I spent 3 with each of these colored beds that I used to design this little kind of staging area here. I got myself 21 ancient debris within an hour, which is not too bad, considering. I was expecting it to be much, much worse, and the problem, I think, was that we were close to the ceiling of where the lava lakes were going to start pouring in, and so maybe drop the height by a couple of blocks. Maybe go in at like Y13 or something like that, because you're still going to blow up a pretty large area around here. You might miss a couple in the ceiling, but you'll probably get a couple in the floor that make up for that, and it does avoid lava pouring in on you. But now, the moment we've all been waiting for, am I right about TNT being a more successful method of mining for ancient debris? Kinda no, to be honest. I actually got 22, which is only 1 more than the beds got, and I'm clinging to that 1 forever, I think. But no, I think, honestly, the experience is what matters here, because yes, I only got the same amount roughly of ancient debris from using TNT to mine, but the experience was a lot nicer. It was nice to set off a chain reaction, and if I'd followed the advice that I just gave myself about the bed method and started a couple of blocks lower down, I could have avoided all of the lava pouring in from the ceiling on this method as well. I had to waste a little bit of time just going to get some more fire resistance potions so I could properly clean that up, because it was becoming a bit of a headache and I wanted to get to where all of the ancient debris was in the tunnel. So perhaps my methods are a little bit flawed here. Perhaps I just need to go back to the drawing board a little bit, maybe consider revising my approach and dig a little bit further down to start my TNT blasting mine. But I think with this amount of TNT, it's just a much more pleasant experience than having to mess around with beds, worry about damaging your armor, have to clear up all of that fire to make sure you haven't missed any ancient debris in the floor or in the walls. I just think TNT is honestly a slightly more fun experience. It is fun setting off a chain reaction of stuff that just kind of disappears down the corridor in front of you, and despite the fact that I had to restart the chain of TNT a couple of times, I was having more fun doing that than I was with the beds. So I think it's probably the better method, although seems like blowing stuff up with beds will produce roughly the same amount of ancient debris. And there are probably some people who are thinking, hey, how about the method where you build a TNT duplicating slime block flying machine and bore your way through this thing automatically? And yes, that is certainly an option. It does potentially run into a few problems when you consider that ancient debris is blast-proof, and a blast-proof block that is also pushable could eventually jam up the machine. I'm sure some more intelligent folks than I am have already figured out solutions to that problem, and I recommend looking up folks like Nembon, Raiseworks, or Ilmango if you want to find a few more technical solutions to the problem. The more complex slime block flying machines are a little bit beyond me, and I don't want to tread on the toes of the people who have put a lot of work in to making tutorials on that stuff for their channels. So go and seek those out if you're looking for a method like that. Personally, I'm quite happy just testing stuff like this, the kind of thing that the casual survival player is going to want to attempt, and seeing how well it goes for us. So I suppose outside of that, the last thing we have to consider about each of these methods is the cost involved, and I rather think that the cheapest one is going to be the least productive one, which is mining. You only need some good pickaxes to do it, and with mending, you should just be able to return to whatever experience farms you have, renew the XP, renew the durability on your tools, and then just keep mining. That's basically it. You might end up, if you want to go the fire resistance potion route just to get yourself through some of the trickier lava pockets, you might end up having to put together a bartering farm or doing a little bit of brewing, but that's really not going to be that difficult if you're at the stage where you are looking to mine for ancient debris in the first place. The bed method is of course one of the cheaper ones and one of the recommended ones for the early game, and that really does bring to bear, I think, on this. You have wood and wool, both easily acquirable in large quantities in the overworld. You can even farm both of them in the nether if you want to farm piglins to get string if you want to barter with them, and of course you can grow wood now that there are warped and crimson giant fungi in the nether. And yeah, you can put yourself together a pretty decent amount of beds for that and go mining to your heart's content, as long as you can put up with exploding things in your face every couple of minutes. TNT is of course pretty expensive to produce. It's mainly the cost of sand that we have to be concerned about here, since gunpowder is renewable, and the farm I built in yesterday's episode really did produce quite a large quantity of the gunpowder. So the sand is really going to be the most costly thing in terms of time. It's going to take you a long time to mine out all of the sand from deserts to get all of this stuff in the first place. I think it's going to be more worthwhile in the long run if you want the ease of approach that TNT gives you. But yeah, I kind of think that maybe beds eke it out just in terms of the material costs involved, unless you're at endgame and you have a little bit of time on your hands and you feel like throwing together a few shulker boxes of sand so that you can get yourself a bunch more TNT. And the end crystal method, as I have mentioned, is kind of trash. It's not all that great unless you want to risk taking the obsidian block out from under the end crystal, at which point you risk hitting the end crystal itself, unless you have hitboxes enabled, in which case you have to deal with all of the wireframes and stuff being out there. And yeah, the expense of making end crystals, that's glass from librarians, ghast tears you have to farm from ghasts, plus ender pearls, plus blaze powder to make the eyes of ender. I think they're a little bit too expensive to be worth it in this case. Fun, like I said, for a bit of a flex, but aside from that, you really don't need to use them to mine when you have alternatives like beds and TNT. I am going to eat my words on the whole bed thing. I've been advocating for any approach other than beds, and it may have just been luck of the draw today in what I got when I blasted this area out, but I do think beds are a viable method if you can put up with the sheer amount of explosions and the sheer amount of lava you get as a result. Now I'm going to briefly hop over into a creative test world to show you guys why, when people have suggested wither mining down here, I've absolutely ruled that out. Welcome to my creative test world, where, for the sake of this argument, I have trapped the wither in bedrock. And you'll notice that without anything really to attack, because this is my creative world and I have a mob spawns turned off, the wither just kind of sits here idling, doing his own thing, and occasionally shoots out these. These are the wither's blue skulls, and they will basically destroy any block, regardless of what it is, including obsidian. In Java edition, at least, the blast resistance of any block aside from bedrock or end portal frames does not apply to these projectiles, and they will drop regardless. So exploiting these projectiles is actually a way of getting the wither to farm obsidian for you, because if it happens to shoot a blue skull at obsidian, the game treats obsidian like it has a very low blast resistance, and it will actually break it. You saw there briefly that those 2 blocks of obsidian that I placed there actually got completely destroyed by the wither's projectile and probably fell in lava as item entities. There you go. The same happened just there. And the problem is, that can happen with ancient debris as well. Having built up a section of ancient debris on this side, there you go. As you can see, as soon as the wither fires a blue skull at it, it actually destroyed some of the ancient debris, which seems like a great idea, because then surely the wither just mines it without you needing to mine it with a pickaxe, and you can just collect it once it's been blown up. But unfortunately, the entities that drop as a result of the wither blasting this ancient debris aren't actually blast-proof themselves in the same way that the debris is. The wither can't exactly aim at one of these projectiles downwards, but I can do the same thing effectively myself with TNT. So let me light this TNT with a flint and steel and watch what happens to the debris. It all gets exploded, and trust me, that is not just them having fallen into lava either. I'm going to set up a little obsidian platform over here so we have a blast-proof floor, and I'll detonate some TNT next to some ancient debris that has fallen on the ground. So watch what happens to each of these ancient debris items that's fallen on the ground when I just detonate a piece of TNT nearby. Boom. They all explode. They all get obliterated. And that is why mining with the wither in the nether is not a good idea. Aside from the fact that the fight will increasingly become uncontrollable, the wither will probably break through some of the netherrack and start, lava falling in from the ceiling as we've had to deal with many times already in this episode, but it's also going to potentially destroy blocks of ancient debris that you could have spent time mining yourself. So, apologies for the little creative sidebar here, but hopefully you guys understand now why the wither mining method is not recommended. But at the end of the day, despite having to eat my words slightly about quite how effective the bed method is of mining for ancient debris, I still came away from that with 54 ancient debris added to my collection, and that is very, very good numbers. That is not too bad for a couple of hours mining in the Nether, and I think I am going to continue the TNT mining method. It's what I built the farm for yesterday after all, and I think we could get even bigger numbers if I just refine the method slightly. That is where we are going to leave it for today, folks. I do hope you've enjoyed this little experiment. Feel free to make fun of me in the comments. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching the Minecraft Survival Guide. Don't forget to leave a like on it if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you want to see more, and I will see you guys soon. Take care. Bye for now.